after 1865. And I thought to myself, Juneteenth, well, what is that? And my professor got into it a little bit, and he began to describe it, what it was about. And I found out from him that it was a day that was commemorating when Union troops marched into Galveston, Texas, and announced that the enslaved people of Texas were free. Now, there had not been a major Union military operation or victory in Texas. So slavery had stayed. It had been maintained. But when General Gordon Granger announced his Executive Order 3, or General Order 3, it stated that the enslaved people of Texas were now free. And from that day, June 19, 1865, onward, with varying levels of frequency because of different social issues, economic problems, political problems, people have celebrated Juneteenth. People who were living in Texas brought it with them to Arkansas. They brought it with them to Louisiana, that's my mother's home state. They brought it with them to California during the Great Migration. It's an important holiday. And to me, what's most important about this holiday, even though many of us may not have heard of it before, is the idea that it is not just about remembering slavery. I think for many of us, we would rather not remember slavery to a certain extent because it was horrific. But we have to remember that our ancestors resisted. They resisted a government that succeeded from the legitimate government of the United States. Why? Because they wanted to keep their slaves. I don't have the time to go into it today. I only have 5 minutes. But you would have to take semesters, plural, worth of classes to understand why these people went to war for our ancestors, for the right to own our ancestors. To say that our ancestors were not valuable, that's not true. They were very valuable. They were so valuable, in fact, they were willing to split the country in half for our ancestors. For our ancestors who they stereotyped as lazy, shiftless, untrustworthy, childlike. They were willing to kill their own for that. So Juneteenth is about remembering what our ancestors went through, and ultimately remembering when the federal government announced to the enslaved people of Texas, you are now free. Now we know after that day, it wasn't over. There were black codes that were repealed. There was pushing through the Reconstruction Amendments, which were good. Because of those amendments, slavery is outlawed in the United States of America, with the exception of if you commit a crime and you are in prison. The 14th Amendment guarantees your civil rights. This is because of the Civil War. The 15th Amendment guarantees that a person cannot be discriminated against and obstructed from the voting franchise because of their race. All of that was because of what happened during the Civil War. And we have had a constant struggle ever since to come to terms with and acknowledge that important history. So when somebody tries to take away your voting rights, like what happened during Jim Crow, they couldn't tell you that you can't vote because you're black. That's illegal. But what they could implement was a poll tax. What they could implement was a literacy test that was purposely hard. It was to keep people from what they had been promised. My family has been in this country I found this out from research. My mother's great-great-great-grandfather was here in this country in 1799. He was born in South Carolina, and by the time he was in New Orleans for the 1870 census, the first time blacks were ever counted in this country as human beings on this census, as citizens, he was 70 years old. 217 years. I've heard often that black people need to do better. And I'm not trying to exclude other people from this. I'm not trying to sound hostile, but this is my point. When you read the history of our nation, of America, I don't care what color you are, what color you identify with, what group you identify with. When you read this nation's history, you come to realize that it's not because people weren't trying. It's because they had people on the other side who were trying equally as hard to keep them in the same position they had left, to keep them enslaved. If they couldn't do it by law, in terms of saying you're an outright slave, they did it in other ways. They told them, well, you know, you committed a crime, you're a vagrant, you don't have a job, you go to jail. Nowadays it might be, we caught you with a little dime bag of weed, so you're going to be in jail for a long time. I'm an American, but I'm also black. I'm not ashamed of either one of those facts. And today, we need to commemorate Juneteenth because it is a day when a significant portion of our country, a significant portion of the population of our country, were finally acknowledged as being citizens, as being human beings, what we always were, but for those who relied upon us for the production of their crops, for labor. It's interesting to me, they couldn't trust us to run government, but they could trust us to raise their children.
Talk about it.
You couldn't trust us as human beings because you said we were lesser. And I'm talking about the people of the past, although unfortunately there are some people today who think this way.
Amen.
You thought some of us were inferior, but not inferior enough to have children with. That's just the fact of our history. It's ugly. But it needs to be talked about so that the nation itself can heal. You want to talk about breaking down walls, breaking down barriers, coming together? We have to start with what we're not willing to acknowledge from the past, because then what that will do, that will help us to see what has survived from the past that is causing division today. So I feel like I've overshot my time, but
there you have it.
Oh, I'm being totally fine. Jim Crow to the civil rights movement. And there were movements in between those times. It wasn't just desolate. It just wasn't barren. People weren't just sitting around doing nothing. The civil rights movement was the result of a massive effort to enfranchise people with the rights that they had been promised. What was the end result? We got the Civil Rights Act of 1964, the Voting Rights Act of 1965. Martin Luther King was assassinated in 1968. This issue has not been an easy issue to deal with. We haven't had moments of, oh, let's just hold hands and we're all Americans now, let's all come together. No, it's been bloody and it's been violent. Even those who were advocating for peace lost their lives. I advocate myself for peace. I would rather do things peacefully. But something happened last week. It actually happened last year, but it broke me. Last year I saw the footage of Philando Castile the footage that his girlfriend had taken while he was bleeding out. Now, when I saw that, it upset me, and I didn't want to see it. I don't think anybody in their right mind would want to see someone die. It's traumatizing. But last week, I saw the dash cam footage that showed what happened. And that broke me again. I said, my God, not taking God's name in vain, but just how horrific it was. And then I saw the footage from the back of the police car, where Diamond Jackson's daughter is telling her, Mommy, please don't be upset. She's 4 years old. There's some 4-year-old children here today. Mommy, please don't be upset. I don't want you to get shooted too. And I scrolled down in the comment section, and the first thing I saw was, well, Mr. Castile, that was kind of his fault. He should have kept his hands here and the rest. You see, I'm closing on this point. As citizens of the United States of America, and as black people, but other people have had to suffer from this too, we often hear, it's your responsibility. You have to do better. That's been over 200 years of you have to do better. What I'm saying today is, let's change it. We're people. We're human beings. We have people who aren't that great. We have people who are that great. That's everywhere you go. We need to demand better from those who are claiming to be our elected representatives, and from those who are saying we need to respect them because they happen to hold a position. No, it's time we demanded better. That's all I have to say. Thank you for listening.
Thank you for that.